Happy to do that. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you for joining us today. It is, as always, the end of the fiscal year is just crazy. I don't care where you work within NRCS or FPAC. It is busy, busy, busy. So I just want to let you know that, yesterday you probably saw, we just, I'm getting a little bit of background, April. But you probably saw, if you're a member, we did send out the magazine. And so if you haven't had a chance to check that out, we do an annual magazine, and that is our fall edition. Deanne Littlefield is a PAS, a public affairs specialist here in Texas, that is our editor, and it is wonderful. So please check that out if you haven't had a chance to see it. It is just amazing. There's some great articles in there, and you may recognize some people. So I learned a lot about some folks I didn't know. So thanks if you contributed articles. It's really good. On Tuesday, we're going to be doing a presentation to the national leadership team about our barrier initiative. So Cadie and I will be making presentations as far as where we're at on the initiative, where things are at as an agency, on our female numbers nationally, and then we're going to ask for some help. So hopefully if you're on, you'll be able to listen to that and be there to support us. Trying to think what else we got going. We do have, if you're interested in running for an office, we do have several positions that are open. So if you're interested,
no, you can on Monday.
Yeah, I'm just waiting on so we can hear. I just want to put a plug in that if you're interested in running for an office, it's okay. Just reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to anybody. Run for an office, please. We need all the help we can get. I'm going to stop there. We have a great program today. I look forward to hearing from all the speakers. And thank you, April. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So I am going to mute everyone. And so as the speakers come on, you will just need to unmute yourself. And I may mute myself too, so hang on. So can you hear me? Okay, good deal. So I didn't mute myself. So we do have a really great lineup for today. The topic is Career Development Series, writing resumes and navigating USAJobs, because navigating USAJobs can be just a little bit overwhelming. It can be a little bit intimidating, and we definitely want to try to make that as easy as we can. And so the lineup that we have today, the speakers that we have today are, they may not think of themselves as experts, but they're certainly the ones that we want to go to get this information into your hands and to help you do the best job you can navigating USAJobs and getting the resume written and prepared so that it can get you to the point, that next point in the application process and the hiring process. So I am going to ask Katrina to give us kind of an overview of the series, and we'll go from there.
All right, thanks, April. We are excited once again. We are getting close to the end of this series, but this is going to be such awesome information for you all, for yourselves, and to share with coworkers who might have questions and come to you. I am going to, like I usually do, if some of you are repeats, you've heard me say this and recap our year, but if you're new and this is the first one you've attended, there's a lot of resource materials for you to go back and look at when we frameworked our year of career development. And we started out with 3 hours of inspiring this next decade. What do you want to be 10 years from now? What do you want to look back at and say, you know, I crafted and I got to short-term goals, I got to long-term goals, what are our values? And it was just a really, really great package. So that got us launched. Then we talked about the whole NRCS organizational structure. Where could I go? What are some fields, some specialties in our agency that might be of interest to me that I could set a goal to try to achieve? Then we started with the we moved on to the senior executive service. What is it? How can you plan for it? Is it something you want to plan for in 5 years? Is it something you want to plan for in 10 years? Is it something you want to plan for next year? How do I set myself up? What is the strategic leadership development program? And how can that help me be a more effective leader whether you want to stay in a state, if you want to stay in a field office, if you want to be at national headquarters, if you want to maybe go to a different agency, you know, what is getting that training? How can that set me up to meet my goals? We also talked about opportunities at the state level leadership programs, and the states that offer those, and how to set yourself up to be selected to get that valuable training and networking that is so important for your career. We asked the Business Center to come, and they talked all about the structure of the new FPAC and Business Center and what the job opportunities are in that part of NRCS. Last month, we talked about the importance of taking details. There are detail opportunities from field office to area offices, among state offices, up to go on a detail to work on farm bill stuff in headquarters. And now with the virtual environment, you might have more opportunities to take on some of those details and network and get to know people in our agency across all areas. So those are very valuable and important, formal and informal. And now today we're going to talk about the importance of writing a resume, an effective resume, how to navigate USAJobs and in our environment now. And we will wrap it up next month with interviews and the interview process. So we still have one yet to go, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on all these. We've kind of chipped them off one at a time, starting with the big picture and now getting it down to actual you. What are you going to do and how can you do it? I'm going to leave it at that, April. Thank you. I always like talking about all of the cool things that we've done, and everything's recorded except for the Business Center one. That one we had some technical difficulties, but they're all recorded and they're all available on YouTube, correct?
Yeah.
April? Yep, they're all. And so if you missed some of those, I really encourage you to go back and look at some of those. I'll hand it back to you, April. Thanks.
Super, thank you. So next month is interviews, and then in November we're going to have a wrap it up session. Not sure how that's going to look just yet, but we'll get that planned out, and hopefully it'll be a very exciting kind of glance back over the year and a glance forward to the next decade and helping you achieve your career goals. So today, Katrina and I have the great fortune of getting to interact with a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And Cadie Pruss, our National Federal Women's Program Manager and District Conservationist out in Connecticut, she and I had talked over a year ago about the importance of resumes. And so, you know, that information partnered with our development series this year has been able to kind of shape and guide some of those things. And then Katrina has the wonderful opportunity to interact with so many people out at headquarters, and so many of those people that we've brought in to speak through this series. And so Sharif, Branham, and Ron Jackson kind of come to us from Katrina's side. And so this group of speakers today are the people that we felt like would help you the most shape that USAJobs experience and your resumes. And so we're really excited to have them. And we're going to start off, we kind of have two sections. Sharif is going to visit with us about navigating USAJobs, kind of the do's, the don'ts, the tips, how to successfully do that. And then we're going to move to a roundtable discussion about the resumes. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sharif and ask that you'll introduce yourself and then start talking to us about that USAJobs aspect.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this meeting. I will clarify that I'm not a USAJobs expert. I have quite a bit of experience on the side of applying for jobs, but also working to get positions filled in various positions as I work through headquarters. My background is I originally worked for NRCS in New Jersey for a number of years, started in 1997, kind of worked as a resource con, DC technician, kind of worked my way up and eventually got into headquarters in 2010 on detail. They extended my detail. I applied for a job in the Eastman Program Division and eventually was hired on in January 2011. Had various national program manager roles, eventually became Director of Conservation Planning and Technical Assistance Division in 2015, and then served as the acting chief of staff to the associate chief of conservation for 2 years, and then became the acting deputy chief of soil science resource assessment for 200 days. Did that, loved that job. It's hard, but it was a good job. And then became the director of strategic support services division in the newly created management and strategy deputy area. So here in headquarters. So we work mostly on the operational aspects of what the agency does. Lots of interaction with the business center. And I only point all those things out because in a number of those roles, I was in a position of hiring people. And so not only do I had to do things like help, look at position descriptions and create the announcements, working with human resources and now human resources division. So I'm on the side where we develop things that actually got to go into USAJobs, but also been on the side where applying for positions. And so in that process, being on both sides, working quite a bit with HR, came to realize quite a few things that are not obvious or apparent to folks who have to apply for jobs. Once you start learning things about how job announcements are created and the language that's in there, you see it from that side of things, you start realizing that there's things that would make it much easier to the end user if they were aware of them. And so one of my responsibilities in headquarters right now is we work quite a bit with HR on filling positions, like contracts to work with OPM directly, for example, to fill headquarters positions, but also the make sure we hire positions to the would consider the agency's hiring cap. So each year since this new administration, current administration, they've established a hiring cap, and the agency has to be able to hire only up to that cap, and states get an allocation number of positions they can fill, and so does headquarters. And so a lot of interaction with on the various aspects of that. And when I realized with USAJobs, one of the challenges for lots of folks is just the language in the announcements. And so some people like to read it, and it's difficult sometimes to even figure out, like, well, who's the supervisor of this position, and what exactly is this job going to do? And so I think one of the things I would start out with, if the job is applying for is with NRCS, fingers crossed, hopefully they are, but if not, either way, is try to look at, they'll often tell you what area of the agency it is. They'll say, like, this position will be under the deputy chief for, pick, soil science resource assessment. And so a key question is, well, who is the deputy chief of soil science resource assessment? And typically the position is under someone who's reporting to that person. So if it describes down to the level of the division within that area, it's important for you to know, like, who is that person and what's that position, what's their job? Because oftentimes it's the case that the positions that they're advertising are for series that there's multiple folks in that series. So it may be for example, they'll use, like, I'll be the hydrologist series, for example. Well, the position may be filled as a hydrologist, but what that person is going to do may be slightly different than another position that was filled as a hydrologist. Just an analogy to for, like, the state level, often there's 457s and 401s, but not all 457 and 401s do the same as a job. It's similar in headquarters. A lot of the headquarters positions, for example, are one of a kind. If you're trying to apply for one of those positions, for example, you want to know what they're doing. If you're applying for a state level position, similarly, you want to know, am I actually going to be doing, the same thing as a 401 in the state or a 457 in the state that I'm in, or is it slightly be different? So that when you're filling out the information, you're speaking to the person who's trying to fill that position. You want to be able to tell them how you're going to meet their need. And so when you're looking at those job announcements, if it's not obvious what they're asking for, looking for, usually in somewhere on that announcement also has a contact name. Don't be shy about using that contact name. You want to call them if you have questions about it, to make sure what you're interpreting they're asking for is actually what they're asking for. Now, they may not be able to answer every question, but you most likely end up with more information than you started out with. So if you feel uncertain about something, it's better to ask than to guess, so that you're more likely to be on target by answering the questions. One of the things I've noted with lots of folks too is they're at a point in their career, they want to do something different. They're not exactly sure what that different is. What are my other options out there? And so sometimes the way you put in a job, the keywords into a USAJobs can significantly, determine what results you get out of it. And so I would say for those, and I know that in NRCS, we have a culture where people really value their 400 series like they want to be a 457 or 454 or 401. Not everybody feels that way, but lots of folks do. But I would say, depending on where you're at in your career, if you're looking for some growth and to do something different, think about your path. Like, hey, I've been in this position as a Silicon for 5 years, and I want to figure out how to get into a leadership position. Then you need to start thinking about, do I need to do a detail? Do I need to start applying for positions that'll build towards some supervisory experience? And sometimes those opportunities are not exactly always in the 400 series jobs. Sometimes they are. But I say that to say that sometimes you want to make sure you pick keywords that actually bring up things that are jobs that are in areas of interest to you that are not restricted so much by the series. You can certainly search by series, and I think that's important for those who know for sure they definitely only want to be in that series. But I would encourage folks to broaden their horizons and think more on the key characteristics of the position as opposed to restricting it too much based on this series. I'll just throw it out there because I've noticed for a number of folks sometimes, like, hey, I thought, I wanted to apply for this job and I thought it was going to be coming up and I didn't see it. Well, they changed the series of the job. The responsibilities are similar, or they added to them. Series got changed, and the person didn't see it because they were only searching by a certain series and they didn't come across your screen. The other thing I wanted to encourage folks to consider is really make good use of the save search function in USAJobs. If you put your keywords in there and you come up with a good list of jobs that you feel good about, like, oh, this is a good list, this is a bunch of opportunities that I really am interested in. There's a function when you do that, it gives you the option to save the search. Definitely save the search. It makes it much easier for you to find jobs later, and it will send you those jobs by email, on a repeated basis, so you don't have to always keep searching. I'll encourage you to search again. Don't rely solely on your save search. The save search does help you a lot, quite a bit. I think usually around midnight each night or so, at least Easter time, it's about around midnight, they'll send you a list of jobs that meet your search criteria. And I know for a lot of people that they really like that feature. And you can create more than one save search. And I believe they last for like a year. So at some point, they'll tell you that you have to update your save search. Determine whether or not you want to keep that same one or you want to do a new one. But I encourage you to make really good use of saving those save search. The other thing I wanted to touch on is some of the things that I see as common issues for those who they've done a good job of finding the job they're interested in, and they're putting in their application, and some of the things that that can trip people up. One of the key things is the required documents aspect of the application. Look really closely at any kind of job announcement on USAJobs when they talk about required documents. It's often the case that some agencies are very particular, and sometimes within certain agencies, certain divisions or areas of agencies, are very particular about the documents that they require for that job. Sometimes, like for example, it doesn't require a security clearance. You got to provide, prove that you have documentation for that. Does it require? They want your latest SF50 that is and sometimes it'll be specific as non-award based SF50. So they want to see that that you actually are a current federal employee. They want to see that you are. Maybe something that talks about your performance plan, your performance rating, or something like that. Whatever it is they're asking you, make sure you pay close attention to that and provide them exactly what they're asking you for. I've seen in a number of cases where the applicant pool is really rich, like there's lots of good applicants, and now they're in a position, the hiring managers in the fortunate position that I have lots of choices here, and I got to whittle down the pile to, just like say you got 20 good applicants that you got to consider amongst, and maybe sometimes in other cases way more than that. I got to get it down to a couple that I'm really interested in interviewing, and then I got to make selection. So how do I get this pile down? So sometimes what they'll look at is, did they follow closely the documents that we requested? Because if they did, that means one, they could tell me two things as a hiring manager. This person actually is good at paying attention to detail and following instructions, because they actually provided exactly the documentation that I asked for. They didn't provide me more, they didn't provide me less. But that's only if you have to pay attention to some cases that will explicitly state in the announcement, do not provide more than these things, or do not provide a resume longer than this, or do not provide an SF50 that's more than 8 months old, or whatever it is. Make sure you pay close attention to that. I'm spending time on that particular component because I've seen, unfortunately, people who are really good applicants who get eliminated from the pile, so to speak, for consideration, not because they wouldn't have been a perfect fit for that job. It's because they needed some criteria for which to reduce the number of applicants in that pool that they were actually going to interview, and that for them spoke to them about whether or not that person could follow instruction or pay attention to detail compared to all the others who were really good applicants who did exactly what they asked them to do. So pay attention closely to that part of the applicant. And also, big part of the documentation is certainly do not forget to actually include anything. Not including a document that they require will almost universally get you eliminated from the consideration. In many cases, HR won't even pass it on to the hiring manager to consider. So hiring manager doesn't even know you applied. So be careful about that. The other part is application questions. Depending on the kind of job you're applying for and what the hiring manager puts in that announcement, the way, some of you probably already know this, but the way that kind of works, HR provides a list of questions to the hiring manager based on the position you're trying to fill. So you provide a bunch of documents to HR to say, this is the position description, and this is the grade and all the information I want to fill this position. And they provide a bunch of things back to the hiring manager to say, well, I need you to fill out this document showing that there's the right considerations. I need you to pick from the library of questions, the questions that will help you narrow down, basically generate the score, so to speak. That's the basis of the rating for the applications. So applications are scored and rated by HR before it gets sent over to the hiring manager. So hiring manager is never seeing all the people who applied. They're only seeing the people who were, rated as best qualified. So the job of the applicant is to basically put their best foot forward in the application so that HR can see that you should be referred over as a best qualified applicant. And so the first part of that whole, process is like you're not only providing those documentation as referenced earlier, you're answering a bunch of questions. And so what I've seen happen quite a bit in some of these questions, the questions, unfortunately, I should back up. The questions are not questions that the hiring manager wrote. That doesn't happen. What happens is that HR provides a list of questions, a library of questions, and they sometimes will suggest to you the ones you should use, and sometimes they'll say, here's the list of questions, tell me what do you want amongst these, the ones you want to use. And usually there's many of them, so you have to pick the ones that you think best represent the skills and abilities that you think are needed to do well in that job. And sometimes they're nowhere near, but you pick the closest one. And so sometimes you'll see in a job application, like, why are they asking me this question for this position? It's the hiring manager's best attempt at trying to get you to tell them how closely your skills match what the job is. And so the questions sometimes seem kind of cryptic or not apropos for the situation, or confusing. So the helpful part of that is, do you actually know something about the unit you're applying for, whether it's a specific field office or state office, who the supervisor is going to be, or in headquarters, what that division or deputy area supervisor, what do they do? That may help you better focus in on what they're asking. What does that person really want to know this question you're asking? Which is why I pointed out earlier. You know something about where you're applying, it may help you better in answering the questions later in the application process. The other part about it is that they'll ask you lots of questions. Some of them would seem repetitive. And some of them are basically trying to get you to rate yourself by saying, tell me, do you consider yourself, at whatever level in this particular skill set? So they ask you about some skill set and ask you to kind of rate yourself. Sometimes they'll put the questions, the response options you can select from in ascending order or descending order, meaning that the first option in that list of options is, if you pick that one, that means you're an expert in that area. And the last option is the one saying that you have no experience. But sometimes they flip it in a different order and make it, descending. So the first option is to mean, say you have no experience. The last option is you're an expert. And I've seen other times when they mix it up, meaning that you really have to be paying attention to what the options are, because the second option in that list is the one that actually says, if you pick that one, that's the one saying that you have the most experience. So I'm only pointing that out because sometimes they're trying to get through that application process relatively quickly, and they pick one, saying, oh, they're making an assumption that the first option means that they're the best qualified, and they pick it, and really, it's not the order the options were provided in that list. And also make sure if a similar or same question is asked multiple times, which sometimes happens, that you're answering the question the same way, so you're not providing conflicting responses to the same question. I've seen that happen too. I'm not sure why. When I have worked on these things, I've never doubled up on questions, but I've seen that in applications. The other thing I've noted quite a bit is that because I've had to do work on these things myself for hiring positions for jobs for areas I run, but also helped others on rating applications to, develop, interview panels and interview people. What I've seen most often that it can often be the case that the way women answer their questions, the way men answer their questions are different, in that, I'm not trying to generalize, but saying that there's often a case that if you're asking the applicant to rate their skill at a particular area, it's often the case that the woman will err on the side of the more conservative response to that question. So if they have experience in the area and it's asking you, are you expert, or you have some experience of this much or more, or you have no experience, if they feel like they can't completely, down to the, minutia detail document that they have that expert level experience, then they don't pick that expert level experience. They'll put something like, I have, the middle ground of it, or something like that. Well, oftentimes the male will pick that they're expert in that area. And I'm only pointing that out because you actually may, the woman actually may be the better qualified candidate. She just picked the option that was because she felt like, oh, I can't adequately document that I'm actually expert in this thing because I have all the experience, but it's on the job experience or whatever it is. It's not in some document somewhere. In often cases, it seems to me that the guy has no problem saying, I'm the expert in this thing, and he'll select that option. So keep in mind, if you feel like you have the expertise in that area, don't short sell yourself. Pick the option that is best reflective of your experience. So I just wanted to point that out because that's come up quite a few times, and then usually either they say nothing or it comes back later on. They'll ask like, why didn't I get selected? Get referred or whatever. And you kind of walk through and have this conversation with them, and you realize that's what happened. So your goal is basically to do all you can to get HR to refer you to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager to be able to see why it is that you meet the level of expertise that was part of that rating process. See what else. I think those are the major highlight areas I wanted to mention to you. I will emphasize one more time before I stop talking that if there's questions about the application or the wording or a deadline or anything in the application, definitely reach out to HR. The contact that's on that an announcement. It is often the case that there's errors in the application. There's errors in the language on the announcement, unfortunately. And sometimes there's problems with the actual application itself. So you'll be clicking through the automated app, because sometimes you'll be clicking through answering questions, and you save and go to the next page and next page. And sometimes what happens either with the functionality that allow you to upload documents or things like that don't work correctly. If those things are happening, make sure you contact the point of contact and let them know, because those things are put in individually. And sometimes they had no idea that was not working, because on their side, when they put it in, it looked fine, it worked fine. But on the side of the applicant, it was not working fine, and they don't say anything. So they just do the best they can to get the information in there. Someone else calls and they say something and they get the consideration, oh, well, this is what you got to do, and they'll fix it. But don't let a malfunctioning announcement that's not working either language-wise or is unclear or doesn't work, stop you from putting your best foot forward for a job application. Definitely reach out to them if you see some kind of problem and have them fix it, because they would typically are very responsive. The other part of it too is certainly that if you know something about the unit you're applying for, and you see some errors there that you're not getting response from the point of contact, you can always send a message saying like, I noted this error, so they can, at least try to work with their point of contact in HR and to get that fixed. Because I've seen a number of cases where they'll actually, once an applicant points out a problem, they'll resend the announcement, fix it, and then reissue it, and then everything's fine. But if no one points it out, then sometimes what results is applications that don't reflect what the hiring manager is looking for, and they don't know why they got poor showing. And the problem is, well, the people weren't able to upload their documents correctly, or some other error caused a problem. So I hope what I shared was helpful, and I'll stop talking. If you have questions about what I stated, need me to clarify or add anything, I'm certainly available for questions. Thank you, April. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Sharif. So we do have about 5 minutes to take some questions for Sharif. So if you have any specific questions about this section, please feel free to unmute your computer or your phone and ask those, or you may use the chat box to ask those also, and we'll monitor that. So we did have another thank you. So this is excellent information. So I'm not seeing questions yet. With this, what you said, it sounds to me like you do not want to wait very long with reviewing that vacancy announcement and getting started on your package.
Right. So often, one thing I just, that makes me think about is some jobs will actually announce positions and that they know they're going to get a high response rate for, and they'll say, they'll put something like, we'll cut off at 50 applications or 150 or whatever the number is. So make sure if you see something you're really interested in, does it have an applicant number restriction on it? Because if it does, you could be the best applicant ever, but if you were number 51 out of 50 and their limit was 50, you will not be considered. So keep that in mind.
Okay. There is a question. Is there a way to view the questions associated with the announcement prior to answering?
In most cases, there are. Usually there's a function for it. You can usually click through to like you're going to apply and then instead print out the question. That's what I typically would advise people to do. Obviously, you don't have to print them out because you can generate this on the screen and just look at it on the screen. But people would ask me that question before. I had recommended that you can actually click through to act like you're going to apply, but actually then it'll let you review the questions and then print them out so you can see all the options and kind of like think about what's your answer is going to be. You can also look at them in context of what documentation I have to back this up if they ask me about it, right? Because the first go around, they're not asking for documentation to answer the questions. They're just asking you to answer the questions. The subsequent follow-up could be like, well, how do you document that you have a PhD in whatever or whatever else is they're asking you for? So, but yeah, there typically is. The one caveat is that some jobs, the way they're set up, some agencies have such you're applying to USAJobs and then they push you over to the agency specific part of a site. Like I think, I think Forest Service does that sometimes. I think EPA, a number of agencies will have their own own version of the USA. So you go from USAJobs to your own agency site, ask you additional questions. I'm not sure about those, whether or not they are always available for preview or prior to actually answering them. The ones that are directly in USAJobs, I believe, typically you can directly look at all the questions.
Very good. Another question is, what should I do when I'm referred to for a soil conservationist position, but we're not referred to the same position in a different town in the same state with the same application?
Good questions. Absent knowing anything more specific than what you described, that's when it comes down to if you a phone call to the HR point of contact, because usually they can tell you something or they can actually help you communicate with the hiring manager about it, because sometimes what happens is if the HR point of contact misinterpreted or the HR reviewer misinterpreted information you provided in your application, whether it's, for example, they looked at your resume and said, well, this person was supposed to have, I'm throwing out numbers, don't, hold me to them. They're supposed to have, 4 credits of plants and 10 credits of soils, and they're looking at your information and they can't tell that what's in your transcripts is plants because it says horticulture and agronomy and botany, and nowhere on there says actual plants, even though all those things actually have plants in them. That HR person didn't interpret that as such, and then they didn't get you for it, and so you think you didn't get referred, right? That potentially could happen if it's not the same person who reviewed your application for the other office that you did get accepted for. So there's a lot of things that could make that happen, and I mean that's not necessarily be any fault of your own. So it's always worth calling and reaching out and saying, asking them questions to see if there's something that could be done for you to get a better, at least understand what happened. Right?
Yes.
So I'll stop there.
Final question. Can you share any insight as to how the applications are ranked? Is it done manually or through an automated process?
I can't speak universally. I'm aware that lots of the questions have like values, like there's a value to the points for the questions, right? So the hiring manager can select the questions and they can add values to the, work with HR base, say this one is more important than this other one because this is the one that most demonstrates the skills at which I believe are needed to do this job. These other ones are important as far as it could be ability to work with, groups or individually, and that's important, but it's not as important as the one that demonstrates specific knowledge and ability about something. And then people, those are in there, and so that when they're answering the questions, it's generating the score that HR is reviewing. Hope that answers the question. And if there's any HR folks on the line who have insight to some of that, they can speak to as well. I know that some of us, there's some automation to the numbering as far as values, but as far as the actual rating them, I think somebody is actually looking at the numbers, adding them up, and making sure what was answered actually equals is an adequate response enough to get the score, and then they will use that to make the referrals.
Very good.
I think I
Thank you,
saw somebody
Sharif.
trying to answer that question as well. So if somebody has a
Yes,
better answer than I appreciate it.
Eureka answered and said that the applications are ranked individually, and so she has a pretty good handle on that. So very
Awesome.
good. Thank you, Eureka.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to a roundtable discussion of resumes. And so we're going to have Sharif continue to join us, Cadie Pruss, our National Federal Women's Program Manager, as well as Ron Jackson. He's the Human Resources Specialist with the Workforce Planning and Recruitment section. And we're very glad that they're here. We decided to do a roundtable section because everybody on this panel, so to speak, has input and has a different way of looking at each of these parts of this roundtable and different tips and things to share with you. And so we will start with resumes, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Sharif, and you have 5 minutes. And so if you will share your hints, tips, and tricks, or whatever else you want to share on your resumes, and then next we'll move to Cadie, and then finally to Ron.
Okay, I'll be brief because I know I was talking for a while and I don't want to hog the airtime or steal anyone else's thunder. But so I'll speak to from the point of view of a person who's trying to look for someone to fill a job. Right? There's lots of folks who typically are applying for any given job. And so there's a couple things you want to do. Take a look at the job. Well, two things. Make sure you're not only adequately capturing your experience, but keep in mind that the person who might be trying to hire you may not necessarily be as familiar with the vernacular, the language that you may use to describe. Like, for example, NRCS has a habit of talking very inside baseball to each other. And we don't even realize it. We'll talk about a TSP, we'll talk about a CNMP, we'll talk about a CRP, an ASAP, a WRP, ASAP ALE. We go all over the place, all these acronyms and things that we talk about. And so depending on who you're talking to, they interpret what you're saying completely differently. Like to an NRCS person, a TSP could be a technical service provider or a thrift savings plan, right? So if you're in HR and you say TSP to me, I may think you're talking about thrift savings plan, not necessarily a technical service provider. And I say all that to say that don't assume that the person who's going to read your resume knows what those acronyms are or what the context of that description of your experience means to it may mean something to you, and it may mean something very specific in your state or in your area or your field office. But it may not mean much to anybody who's not in that scenario. So make sure you're describing it for the audience that's not just people you're used to working with directly in your area or state, that you can express to them what it is we do. And oftentimes I recognize it's hard sometimes as an NRCS employee to describe what we do to people who are not from NRCS, because what we do is relatively unique in the context of most of the workforce of the country. So use language that's plain, do a good job explaining in non-technical terms what is it you're doing, and then also like your current job and what the highlights are, but in a way that actually shows why you'd be valuable in the job you're applying to. Because you don't want to talk so much about your current job in a way that I'm just describing what I do now, but it's not obvious how that applies to a job I'm trying to, apply for and get, right? You want to basically paint the picture to them. Why is this person a good fit for this position I'm trying to fill, right? Can I imagine them in this job based on what the information I'm seeing on this paper? So you don't want to make it hard for them to find that information. So you're basically trying to draw for them an image that says, I could see this person doing this job. Now, I remember I have this is a particular, for example, this is a particular area that has the producers in this area are pretty tough. They really expect a lot from our, this DC, and they show up to the office and they demand personal attention. The last DC was here for a long time. They have a very personal touch, all those kind of things. Like, they know that office, and that's the position I got to fill. So if they're looking at their resume, does the resume show a technical skill? Is that any obvious that the person has people skills or has ability to deal in difficult situations? Is that any of that obvious? So they're looking for information that helps them fill out what is it that this person can do. So if you're saying things like, I have experience working on supervisory committee, I have facilitation skills, I have worked in this field office for 10 years doing these specific things, and I understand and know these programs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then it helps them know something about what you can do. But if you said it all in a way that didn't harp on, really rely on just acronyms and high-level descriptions, then not that you want to go into, very long length, because there's a certain limit on the resume size you want to use, but you want to do enough that they understand how you got the experience you got, and where does it apply to the job you're trying to fill. So make sure your resume has some connection to the position you're trying to get into, not just documenting what you did in the position you're currently in, or you've done in the past. April, I'll stop there because I know others have good advice to provide as well.
Super, thank you. Cadie.
Okay, good morning. So I'm Cadie Pruss, and I am the National Federal Women's Program Manager. I'm also a district conservationist in Connecticut, and I have had the opportunity to hire soil cons, and then actually this week I was helping our conservation district with hiring individuals. So this was fresh, and this is good timing. I'm hopeful that I will capture what Sharif said, and I'm hopeful that you will hear sort of the same thing over and over again from all three of us to some degree, because really there is a lot of overlap. So one of the big takeaway messages that I would like all of you to have is that you have two audiences when you are writing your resume and when you are going through the whole process of application. You have two audiences that you're addressing. The first is HR, and Sharif talked about how to get through USAJobs, and he talked about how to get through that application. But then you also have to remember that it is HR that is going to be reviewing your resume and determining whether you get to audience number 2 or not, and that is the hiring supervisor. So when you are writing it, and Sharif makes a very good point about NRCS and our acronyms, it's always good form in technical writing to always write out the full what it is, and then put in parentheses what that acronym is, and then you may use it later, but you've spelled it out. So that's the first thing. And then give your resume to a friend who does not work in the field and ask them to look for certain things, and ask them if they understand the resume. And if you were to say, do I have soils classes? And did you see the following things? Go through the questions that are in the job application, where it gives the list of responsibilities and duties. You can say to your friend who's not in the field, do you see where I have experience in the following areas? And that will help give you a better idea of whether that might get through HR or not, because as Sharif said, not everybody in HR is in the field that we're in. So even though botany seems, of course that's a plant, or dendrology, of course that's a plant course, not if you don't know the fields that we're in. So the first thing is you got to get your application past HR. Then you've got your hiring supervisor, and the hiring supervisor needs to see that you're qualified. They're wanting to see that you are the best person. Now, you can't guess. You can't second guess. You don't necessarily know unless you know the office or unless you're doing your homework. Maybe you do some homework and you do know As Sharif was talking about, what type of person are they looking for? Maybe you know that they're looking for somebody with more people skills than more computer skills. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. So if you don't know that, then don't try and second guess, but just put your best foot forward. But one of the things that I have seen is that people write very generic statements. And generic statements don't tell your supervisor anything. So you want to be very specific, and really, truly, you want to be quantitative. So for example, you might want to say, from 2013 to 2015, I increased the yearly brief technical assistance, and then you can write BTA in parentheses if you feel the need to, as reported in PRS, but I can't even remember what that performance results system, from 2 people to 252 people for a 3-year period. So the bottom line is, don't just say increased brief technical assistance in the field office. You want to be quantitative, and you want to give maybe a period of time. You'll also want to say that you increased your contract applications by 10%, and then you can give the numbers from X to X, or you can say you increased it, from X to X, and it was this percent. But be quantitative and show that you are really making a difference, because what your hiring supervisor is looking is, how are you going to add to the office? How are you going to make a difference? What is it that you're going to bring? And so just generalized statements, they don't cut it. You'll also want to make sure that you are capturing all that you do. So one of the things that was very helpful this is going away, but when we had to do our performance reviews, it was a good time for us to reflect on our year and to pat ourselves in the back and to see, how many contracts did I have? How much money did I bring to the county? How many practices were implemented? Did I bring contracts that had been out of compliance back into compliance? Did I do anything? Did I have any kind of really special events that made me shine? It was a good opportunity for us to do a year in review. I would recommend that even though we're going to a pass-fail, please continue to do that so that you can update your resume, so that you can go back from year to year and you can say, I have increased my participation in this county from, people walking in the door once a day to 25 people walking in the door on a regular basis, and not just here to drink our coffee, but actually here to talk to us about conservation. So, it's really important. And one of the things that I wanted to also mention, because I had mentioned this I'd mentioned this to April and Katrina, I have seen that the resumes that women show are not as quantitative. They are not as much of a pat on the back. They're not as numbers oriented as some men's are. And so it can be a giveaway whether the applicant is male or female, or start the bias right there just on the differences in how some of the resumes are written. So really try and pat yourself on the back, really try and be quantitative, and as Sharif also said, know what job you're applying for. The other thing you don't need to do is give your entire resume. You can give a subset of your resume. So one of the best practices that everybody should be doing right now is keep a master list. Keep a master list of your resume. But the examples I've given so far have been field office related examples. If you're a field office person and you're applying to something else, maybe half of what would be in your resume for field office doesn't apply to what you're applying for. You can take it out and focus on the job that you're actually applying for. You can have different resumes for different jobs. So if you keep a master list of all your successes and everything you do, tailor the resume to the job that you are applying for. And that's really going to help sell things. And it might take your resume from being 15 pages down to 5. And by the way, a 5-page resume is fine. So the federal government, you can do that. But yeah, I don't want to steal Ron's thunder, so I will stop now and let him take over.
Thank you, Cadie. Ron?
You're on mute, Ron.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
We can.
Hello? Excellent, excellent. I was going to say, Cadie, you are taking away my thunder. But anyway, I'm going to try. I'm Ron Jackson. I'm not an expert either, but I am a human resource specialist in workforce planning and recruitment. Specifically, I work with outreach, diversity, and inclusion. And most recently, we have been conducting some veterans hiring events, and I've had an opportunity to look at many resumes. And I will say that most of the folks here have an idea of the difference in the private and federal resume, but I want to touch on that for a second, because I got that question asked quite often recently is what is the major difference? The private resume is normally more concise. It's about 1 to 2 pages. The federal resume, as Cadie said, can be about 5 pages, but in my experience, it's only about 5 to 7 pages long. And the major difference is that we capture more detail about work experience. What I ask people to do is when you're writing them, write it in the outline form. You want to tell a story about your experiences, what you did, when, a brief description, using sentences short and long, and highlight your responsibilities, the different hats you wore in those positions. When you're doing that, make sure you're using action words. Your present job experience is in the present tense. However, your past experiences, make sure you write them in the past tense. A key thing also is to look at your accomplishments. As Cadie was saying, make sure everything is qualified and quantified. Now, one key thing that I hear, and the same thing I think you've heard before, is you need to tailor or custom your resume to the position you're applying to. And you may ask, how do you do that? It starts with the job announcement. What I would encourage you to do is first print the job announcement out, but also cut and paste specific sections of that job announcement and put them in a Word document. Those sections are the position, the responsibilities, the duties, and a specialized experience. Why would you do that? You should do that because you need to do an analysis specifically what the hiring manager is looking for by doing a keyword analysis. And when you pull out those 3 sections, you'll be able to see that and determine which specific knowledge, skills, and abilities that the staffer is trying to determine by looking at your resume. Keep in mind, again, your resume is actually telling a story of who you are by virtue of your work experience. It's representing you. So what you're charged to do is actually demonstrate to them in your resume that the experiences you have listed match those knowledge, skills, abilities that are identified in those duties, responsibilities, and specialized experience. That's all I have on that section.
Super. Thank you. Very good. So the next part of this roundtable are the questionnaires. And so, Cadie, we're going to start with you and your comments and tips on the questionnaires.
Yep. My comment on the questionnaires, really just mirrors what Sharif said, and that is, don't assume that the correct answer is the first answer or the last answer. Actually read everything. Now, I have to say, I've applied for jobs too, and I feel that the questionnaires are probably the most difficult part, because they are oftentimes comparing apples to oranges. For example, it might ask you, tell us what you've done that is the highest rating when it comes to supervisoring, and then it says, I've walked out to the mailbox to get my mail, and and you think, how does that apply? And who knows, maybe that's the highest one. Anyway, where I'm going with that is, some of the questions are really difficult to know, but trust your gut, answer the question. You can print them out. I highly recommend you do not wait till 11:59 Eastern time to apply for a job, because you'll be stressed out. You might make mistakes. And so really, truly print them out, but don't overthink them, because, don't overthink them. That's it. That's all I got on that one.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you. I'm probably going to repeat some things again that Sharif said, but I think we need to remember that there are two different stages when we're applying for the job. The first stage is to determine qualification, where the staffer will actually look at ineligible and eligible. That's the first step, looking at, did you meet the minimum qualifications by looking at your resume. Now, to determine best qualified, it is going to rely on the questionnaire. I, again, encourage you to print the job announcement. When you're actually reading through those questions, looking at the specialized work experience, that way you can gauge to see specifically what they're looking for. And as someone said earlier, they were asking, how's it assessed? Well, it is a rating system to determine the best qualified. And if you're reading through the questions, if you see a circle, ask you choice of your best answer, or a square choosing all that apply, if you ask for additional information or a narrative, then that section is probably a little bit more heavily weighted than other sections. Again, if you're not quite sure, look back at the job announcement, look at the specialized experience section, and it can lead you to say, I think I have a better idea of what you're actually looking for. Again, I encourage you to print them out. Remember, all experience counts. Key to what Sharif said earlier, and I think Cadie said that also, about underestimating your past experience. Even volunteer work or club work you did in clubs like Toastmasters, thank you, Katrina, would actually help you to identify you have that leadership experience if you've taken on those roles. And don't sell yourself short. Give yourself credit for all of that. Give yourself credit for the things you've done in college, your college experience, by leading projects or working on projects or participating in those projects. All the experience matters, because if you rate yourself high in all of these areas, the staffer will go back and look at your resume and try to validate information, and they can actually knock you down to a lower score. So the key thing is, don't sell yourself short. That's all I have.
Excellent. Sharif?
Sorry about that. It took me a second to get off of mute. Trying to think to make sure I offer something that's additive, not replicative. I think folks have covered most of the key things as far as the questions. I will say the only other thing, I guess something we can add is that, to Ron's point, things that are asking for like narratives or additional information are probably a good hint that that's a key question is weighted more than others. The other thing is focusing on that sometimes the question is asked similarly multiple different places. Like it's like you may be going through and it's like, it sounds like I answered this question before. Go back and look. Did you answer that question before? Because they might have asked that same similar question previously. And then how did you answer that question? So that you're not answering anything in a way that's conflicting with something you said earlier. Right? what was the logic you used to answer this question? I picked this option because of this, and this experience. So, and the other question that's very closely related to that I want to make sure that my answer is reflective of that, my response in the other one. Because it might be the case that they're trying to zero in on some nuance about a specific type of skill set or experience that they find valuable to them. So they did ask you in 2 different ways. So just look for those places where you could potentially have a conflicting answer, because you don't want to say you're expert in something in response to the question one place and the question's asked slightly differently, but pretty much trying to get at the same thing later, and you're saying you have no experience or you have, very cursory experience. So I'll add that, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Very good. This is very excellent information, and it's been a little bit of a challenge to navigate the video and everything and write all the stuff down.
You're doing a great job.
This is great information, and I hope everybody is gleaning so much, because I can't write fast enough. So finally, we want to discuss the common mistakes that you have seen or perhaps made, or that you have heard of often with an application to perhaps keep them from getting the position, or some kind of a hurdle that it caused. So Ron, we're going to start this one with you.
Again, I got to go back to Sharif, because I think he covered almost everything. The key is incomplete applications. Ensure you read the job announcement thoroughly and understand what they're looking for. That you have all the supporting documents. If you are being qualified by your work experience, that's fine. If you are trying to be qualified reference your education, you need your transcript there. So you need to ensure you have a complete application when you apply. Another key thing is, I think Cadie said that earlier, let someone else review your resume. Quite often, when we were writing this, we think this and we're writing it down, it doesn't always actually transfer to the paper. So there are common mistakes that are made that are more grammatic than spelling. I know if you do spell check, T-O and T-O-O and T-W-O, all check out. But if it's used in the wrong context, it has several different meanings. So let someone else read through your resume to ensure that what is written down there is actually is what you're trying to convey. That's all I have.
Excellent. Sharif?
I'll give 2 quick things. So make sure if you're including references in your application that those references are still good for you, right? That there's someone who still is vouching for you. So you don't want to have the case where you asked somebody 5 years ago to be a reference. You haven't talked to them in 5 years. They suddenly get a call from someone, and they're like, who's that? Or they give you a response that you're not anticipating. So make sure you have current, good references, whether they're personal or professional, right? The other thing is, I know for lots of us, especially if you're an ambitious person and you're at a place where I need to do something different, I'm going to really get my job applications out there, so I'll get a good job. You're working on a bunch of different job applications, you're doing some cover letters, you're doing your resume, you're doing all these things. Make sure you double check any kind of cover letter that you include, so you don't have like you're applying for a job with Fish and Wildlife and it's addressed to someone at USGS or NRCS. You address it to the wrong person, or you have the wrong supervisor's name or whatever it is, and they're looking at that like just like somebody who just is applying for a bunch of jobs. They're not really interested in this specific position. That's it's a red flag. You want to make sure you don't do that, because that person reading those, looking at those applicants, I mean, they rationally know you're probably applying for multiple jobs, but they want to know that you pay attention to and are interested specifically in the job they're trying to fill. So pay attention to those details. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent point. And Cadie?
I am going to second that last statement right now, because, first off, I do see kind of a lot of cover letters, or even job just like where people put their objective statements and they forget to change the name of the town, the name of the state, the name of the place. And, so first off, one, that's sloppy, but 2, I also think about how that relates in my field office, for example. We send out letters to producers all the time. And a lot of times we're doing sort of a mass mailing, but we have to make sure that we're getting the right people to the right, the right letters to the right people with the right names and the right contract numbers. And, there's a lot of little things that make people think. And the only thing you want to make somebody think is, I need this person. That is the whole thing that you are trying to get them to think. So when it comes to mistakes, definitely, yes, grammatical errors, yes. Not knowing where you're applying or forgetting those things. Christine in the chat said that, and I was going to bring this up, she said that some of the biggest mistakes that I hear about as the Federal Women's Program Manager is not getting past HR. So there's a difference. Remember I said you have two audiences. If they are asking for your most recent performance review, they're not talking about your quarterly one or your midterm one or anything else. They mean the one that actually has the rating. And it could be almost 12 months old, but that is the latest one. So make sure that you do everything that you need to do to get through HR so that people like me can actually begin to look at your resume and then look at the kind of mistakes that you're making on your resume, like, did you know where you were applying? And I do think, though, that those mistakes, the mistakes that we see here, once you've gotten through HR, yeah. But just make sure that you are following directions, and NRCS is all about directions and deadlines. And so you need to be able to get through the directions and the deadlines. And yeah, that's that.
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much for your wisdom and your input. It's more of a statement, but perhaps somebody could kind of speak to the potential maybe to help with this. The time frame is so short, and it's hard to get all of your research done and everything done for that position, that location, in a very short amount of time, and it feels like it's always working against you. How can they be better prepared to be ready for those? You see it, you're ready to apply, but you need to make sure it's tailored.
I like the advice that Cadie gave originally. You can have more than one resume available. You can have a basic resume which covers your experience. And again, going back to when you know that specific job you're applying for, you can customize it and tailor it to that specific job. But you have your baseline of what you're doing. And you may ask, how do you do that? There's a section in additional information where you could actually pull out and put specific things from the specialized experience that are applicable to the position you're applying for.
So I'm going to say that, I rarely meet people that just pull up USAJobs and say, I think I'm going to apply for a job today. Most people who are thinking about changing positions or moving up, moving someplace else, have been thinking about this for a while. So first off, I absolutely encourage everybody who's on this to start an account in USAJobs, load your transcripts, load your current performance review, load your current SF50, and pay attention to your SF50s only when you are up for like a step increase, and then make sure that you're uploading the most recent one. But there are a number of things that can be sitting in USAJobs right now that are ready to go that may take you a little bit of time, like, for example, transcripts. They want original, transcripts in there. If you have to contact your university and get that, then start it now. But finding where you can pull the documents, then they're there. And when you're applying, you get to choose which of the documents that are in there the job description requires. So not every job description is going to require all the same jobs, but if you have an idea of the job position that you would like to move to, that let's say you want to move up, start looking at USAJobs on a regular basis now and look at the requirements. Look to see what documents they are. It might not be in the state. You might not be qualified yet. You might have to wait. But start preparing. Start looking at what are those documents. Get them loaded. Start thinking about it. And then that 5-day window. Heck, I had an application. I looked for a job, and it was closing that night. But I had everything that I need loaded, and the only thing I had to do was take out my cover letter, rework it so that it named the proper state and the proper field position and the proper whatever. And I was able to turn it around, but that's because of all the pre-work that I had done. So I encourage you all, start your USAJobs account right now.
Excellent. Ron or Sharif, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything additional. I second what was just said, being prepared so you can quickly pivot for those announcements and things that happen relatively fast, because some jobs have a short open window, and just being ready is good. That'll give yourself enough time to do some quality assurance on the materials you have already there, and then you can really spend time on things like answering the questions in a way that will give you the best chance of getting past HR to the hiring manager and impressing the hiring manager. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Ron, did you want to add anything?
No, I think they covered it. I like the idea of ensure you're going back in there and your documents are updated. And I just found out recently that when I went in 2 weeks ago, that I hadn't been in there for a few years. So definitely, you can ensure you do that.
Good deal. I haven't got any current questions, and we are going to take questions, but I have one on my brain. Resume builder versus Word document.
There are pros and cons each. Using Resume Builder will ensure you touch all the key areas that are required. It takes a bit longer. I think it depends upon how comfortable you are with uploading your resume would be the decision to do that, and how much time you have. Resume Builder takes a bit longer, but you can ensure that you've met all the requirements to make sure you have a good federal resume.
Any other input on that? Resume Builder always looks teeny tiny to me. Is that the way it is seen also?
Yes.
So do you recommend to use Resume Builder and then copy and paste that at a size font that you can actually read?
Eureka, you want to address that?
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of an answer in the background. I didn't hear the question, you guys. Go ahead. What was it?
Resume Builder or uploading your resume?
Both of them have been very successful.
Method.
Yeah, both of them are very successful as long as all the skills match to the job in which applied. Both are accepted.
With what I've seen with Resume Builder, it is teeny tiny font. Do you recommend copying that and pasting it into a Word document that has a more legible font?
So I'm actually going to jump in on this one, even though I think I'm not necessarily like Eureka should be answering this. But one of the things that I think is a good practice is to do your resume in a Word document, then copy and paste into Resume Builder and print it out. And what you will see from Resume Builder are the blocks that you forgot to fill in. And I ended up changing the format of my Word document resume to match the format and the information from the resume builder. And I've been successful applying for positions with uploaded resumes. However, like Ron said, you have to make sure that the information that they're asking for is there. And so whether you want to use Resume Builder or not, if you're more comfortable uploading your current resume, I just recommend that at some point in time, when you're not planning on applying for anything, you're just building your account and you're putting your documents in there, use Resume Builder, print it out, see how it looks, see what you're missing, see what gets cut off, and then use that to form your guidance on how you're going to do your Word document if that's what you choose to use.
Thank you. You just keyed another thing that I meant to mention earlier. When you're doing your keyword search, extracting those keywords from your job announcement, ensure they're in your resume. Make sure they're in all caps in your resume, the one that you upload, so that they stand out.
A lot of wonderful tips and hints here. So we're going to open it up for questions, and I will stop asking them and let all of you unmute your phone and ask questions to Ron or Sharif or Cadie. And I think Cadie probably just stepped away for a moment. She'll be right back. So please feel free to ask questions. And there is a lot of good information going on in the chat, so don't forget to check the chat also.
I apologize. I had to answer a phone. Ron, can you say what you just said about all caps?
Yes, in the keyword search, when you're actually ensuring in your resume that you're uploading, you've captured that. Make sure you have those keywords in all caps so that they actually stand out for the staffer when they're reviewing your resume.
Huh. Okay. That's a good one. I'll change my resume now.
Very good. Any questions? This is your opportunity to, help yourself with this resume.
Somebody asked the question, while I was on the phone just now, did you answer the cover letter question?
I didn't. We didn't ask it. It looks like it's been answered in the, I think I missed it, but it's been answered in the chat. Feel free to revisit that.
I was just going to say that I do think cover letters are good. I do. As long as you make sure that you have changed the information so that the cover letter is actually going to the job that you are applying for. So that's one of those places where people get tripped up and they forget to change the name of the state or the person that they're addressing. So as long as your cover letter is actually to the right person, I think it's a good opportunity to be a little bit more personal, to tell them something a little bit more that's different from the resume. But again, if you're not going to tailor it to the job that you're applying for, then don't bother. So make sure that it's tailored and addressed to the right people.
Okay, so Cheryl just asked, is there anything HR is looking for in the cover letter, or is the audience the hiring manager? To whom do you address that letter?
So this is Eureka. The hiring official will receive those cover letters. HR is not necessarily looking at that. So I definitely recommend submitting a cover letter. One, it can provide you with one-on-one contact to that hiring official, and sometimes you do not have that opportunity 2, it gives you an opportunity to share more specific information relevant to that job that you may have missed in your resume. Is it required? No. Is it beneficial? More times than not.
Excellent point.
Good. Thank you, Eureka.
One thing I thought of, and it's pretty minor, but is just worth adding just in case. So in addition to making sure your resume, your cover letter or documents actually reflect the entity you're actually trying to send them to, right? The naming convention of the actual file. Like sometimes people will name the file for like, to be like, oh, because you're applying for a job with NRCS, you'll name it NRCS cover letter and your, you know, whatever your name is, something like that. But if you're changing the audience, so that you're sending a cover letter to someone else, another agency or entity, to make sure you change the content of the letter, make sure you save that file name to a file name that's reflective of who you're intending it to, because that too, so what I've noticed on my side when I get job applications, I get documents sent to me in USA Staffing, for example. In USA Staffing, you can see documents with the attached. You can actually see, I can actually see file names of the files. And not that I'm going to hold it against anybody if the content is actually what I need to say, but it becomes obvious that somebody just like switched up a couple of things to make it apply to what I'm, you know, what I'm looking at, as opposed to the job, like, you know what I mean? Like they basically just modify something slightly for another job, which I'm not saying don't be efficient in your use in time, but just kind of pay attention to the details so you don't have a job, a document that's titled Fish and Wildlife, but really you're applying to NRCS. Thanks.
Excellent. So there's a question in the chat about the timeline on acceptance, or that even one made the panel. What does the timeline look like on that now?
I'm not clear on that question, April. This is Eureka.
Yeah, what's your question, April? Timeline from application to
on acceptance, or that even one made the panel. I'm not exactly sure who asked this. From closing to panel, what is the timeline from the closing to the panel? Does that help? You're welcome to ask this question yourself. Just unmute your phone and ask. It might make more sense than what I'm reading.
Okay, so I think I understand what he is asking at this time.
Okay.
OPM had a requirement out there for a little while for the agency to operate within a certain time frame. Unfortunately, well, I don't want to put that on record. That's outside of my purview. So Candace Sanders could probably assist you a little bit better with that, Mr. Stephen or Mrs. Stephen, or whoever addressed that question. But Candace Sanders, Workforce Operations, would be better able to help you with that question.
And that's a good response.
So I'm hearing that there's something sticky about this, and maybe moving or changing. And so thank you for kindly answering. And the person who asked thanks you also. And we will follow up and see if we can get a better answer that might maybe more official. And so thank you for tackling that. Any other questions? We have 5 minutes left. So typically we're running over, so please ask questions that you have. This is your opportunity, it's your resume. Okay, so if somebody has a question, it's not too late, but I am going to ask each of our speakers to give their one last piece of advice, that if no one heard anything else, what do you want them to hear today?
Who are you starting with?
Yeah, sorry. We'll start with Cadie.
If there's one piece of advice, I would like to say your resume is the place you should absolutely be prideful, boastful, sell yourself. This is where you are showing all of your wonderful accomplishments and why you have something great to offer and why they should be picking you. And please, 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 sell yourself. Tell everybody how great you are. That is the appropriate place to do it. So by all means, be proud of what you've done and put it down on paper.
Excellent.
I'll go next. I think key to your resume, remember that you actually painting a picture. You're telling a story about who you are, what you've done, what your accomplishments are. You're also showing your core competencies, your value added to the organization. And don't forget that. You know, whether it's your interpersonal effectiveness, your customer service, and your creative thinking. And those are some of the common to any position you go into. Make sure you illustrate that and write it in detail in your resume.
Very good. Thank you. And Sharif, would you please wrap this part of it up?
Certainly. I would say for me, the thing to make sure you don't forget is pay attention to the details, regardless of it's reviewing the job announcement, reviewing your materials you provide, checking with your references that they're still good. Pay attention to the details because they matter. Ultimately, it's a very competitive environment for people looking for new opportunities. And it's often the case that the hiring managers have lots of options and you don't want to give them any reason to not keep your application the top of the pile to consider. That, and if it feels like it's taking too long to get a response, don't be shy about using that number on that announcement to figure out, like, hey, do I have any updates on what my application? That number is there for you to use. So ask them your questions. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you all. Thank you, Ron, Cadie, and Sharif. If we were on Toastmasters, we'd be clapping for you, so thank you. So, Katrina, I think there she, yep. So this is clapping and sign language, and so on Toastmasters, we're virtual right now, and so that is clapping and giving accolades to the speakers. So just to fill you in. Katrina, what do you have to say to wrap this thing up? You're on mute, and it looks like you're saying some wonderful things.
Well, I unmuted my phone, right? I'm talking through my phone, but it was muted both places. So, yeah. Yes, I had something wonderful to say. This has been really useful, and I am looking at making a move after I finish up my strategic leadership development program. And this is going to be very useful. I'm going to go back and listen to it again. I love the plain language. That's what we need to hear. We need to hear how it is in real time, not behind the policy. We got to know the policy, but I like the real language that you all put forth to give us tips. And I thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll hand it back to you, April.
Thank you. Thank you all. This has been extremely beneficial. And I couldn't take notes fast enough. I think there's going to be a lot of people who want the recording and to be able to listen to it again as you should. The recording will be sent out to the WIN members. If you're not a WIN member and you listen to the session and you'd like the recording, please shoot me an email and I will make sure that you get that. The second thing is October 16th is our session on interviews. And so please join us again at that time and we will discuss interviews and the tips and tricks to make those go well. And finally, WIN, Women in NRCS, has a YouTube channel. And so these sessions are recorded there should you not get the recording and need to find that later. So look for that and we'll get it there eventually. That doesn't always happen really fast, but we'll get it there eventually. But the recordings will come out. So At this point, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in October. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Take care.
Bye.